evening, everyone. My name is Deepa Govindarajan-Driver. I'm a university lecturer and trade unionist, and I welcome you to this event, which is, in a sense, looking at the issues around the blood sport, that is the persecution of Julian Assange. This precedent that the Trump administration is pursuing means that any journalist or any editor anywhere in the world who receives and publishes truthful information about the United States could be extradited and sought for prosecution in the United States. What does that say to China, or to Russia, or to Saudi Arabia? How would we react in the UK if a British journalist published secret information that they'd obtained about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi from Saudi Arabia, and then was sought for prosecution and extradition to Saudi Arabia to face prison, let alone 175 years in prison for having published that information in the public interest? There would be outrage. Already we're seeing in Bolsonaro's Brazil, American investigative journalist Glenn Greenwald is now being prosecuted on precisely the same case theory that the United States is running in this case. That is, that journalists can be criminalized and accused of conspiracy for the alleged illegal acts of their sources in revealing information in breach of their own legal obligations. That is a dangerous, dangerous precedent. It may now be Julian and it may now be Glenn Greenwald, but who will be next? It's really important, I think, to, at least Julian has asked me, actually, I saw him in prison this morning, and he's asked me to pass on his thanks to all of you who continue to turn up to protest this situation and to provide support both to Wikileaks and to the Courage Foundation, which is fundraising for his legal defence. One of the things that I've struggled with as someone who has been working on his legal team for the last decade, I walked him into the police station in December 2010. He has been under some form of restriction on his liberty since that time, whether it be under house arrest, within the embassy, and now in a high security prison. I have had to continually resist the normalisation of this treatment of an editor and an award-winning editor, and it's important that we continue to do that. So thank you for coming, and thank you for organising.
I'm John SHIPTON, Julian Assange's father. There's plenty you can do. I mean, for example, you can write to the Minister of Justice, or you can support the Link or the Green parliamentarians who are acting to bring freedom to Julian, and consequently bring a freedom of press and freedom of discussion and freedom of conversation to all of Europe.
I'd like to start with a metaphor that I have used yesterday and at other events, and that described to me and help us understand what's really going on here. This room is big enough to house a couple of elephants, but let's just say we have one elephant in the room. Switch off the lights, it's pitch dark. The elephant is over there in the corner. And now I take a flashlight and I point over in that dark room. I take a flashlight and I point in the other corner. Where will all of you be looking? The other corner, right? Now Julian Assange has taken the flashlight in that dark room and he pointed at the elephant. The elephant of war crimes, the elephant of misconduct under the color of law. The elephant of serious violations of human rights and impunity. He's pointed his spotlight at this elephant, and the elephant, as a deer in the headlights, was frozen for a couple of moments, a couple of weeks. Everybody was discussing these revelations. But then the elephant snatched the spotlight and he turned it over and pointed it at Julian Assange. The room became dark, and the only thing we could see in the room is Julian Assange in the corner and the spotlight pointing at him. And now everybody was discussing Julian Assange's character, Julian Assange's private habits. Was he wearing shorts or long pants during his video conferences? Was he skateboarding in the embassy? Did he feed his cat? Did he smear things on the walls of the embassy? I mean, absolutely trivial things compared to the revelations that he made. Who is the one that has the spotlight? It's certainly the governments and the media. The media are the link. The media are the ones that observe the governments for us and then are supposed to inform us, to empower us, not just to entertain us. But if the media wants to talk about skateboards, we just want to read about skateboards. We're not looking at the elephant in the dark. And I think this is what this is about. This is why everybody's discussing, is Julian Assange a good man or a bad man? Or what has he done? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or could someone have been in danger, potentially? No one has ever heard of anyone being harmed by the revelations, but theoretically it could be harmful, so we have to extradite him to face justice. But no one discusses the people that were murdered on film. They were not endangered, they were murdered.
My name is Kristinn Hrafnsson. I'm an Icelandic investigative journalist. I've been with Wikileaks for 10 years. Prior to that, I was working as a journalist in Iceland mostly for 20 years. And I took over as editor-in-chief from Julian when situation became so unbearable in the Ecuadorian embassy that he couldn't operate there anymore.
So in your speech today, you talked about that you visit Assange today. Could you, for our viewers, just describe the situation there, how he's doing, how he's feeling, and how he's psychologically and physically holding up?
He is holding up actually remarkably well considering the circumstances. I mean, every ordinary individual would have collapsed way before. But he is an extremely strong personality, but it has taken a toll. He was in a critical condition while he was basically being isolated in the hospital wing. That was solitary confinement, basically. He recently was moved from out of the that wing and has now more interaction with the inmates. He has improved a lot since then, and he has also been heartened by the support that he recognizes coming from the outside, and even from the prisoners in Belmarsh who actually have petitioned on 3 occasions for a change in the situation. This is extraordinary, inspiring. You would find more humanity by the hardened prisoner in the maximum security prison in the UK than with the authorities or the government here in the UK who actually okayed the extradition. So he has been improving, but you have to look back as well that he spent all these years in the Ecuadorian embassy, and the fact that that sanctuary was transformed into a prison towards the end of his time there in embassy when there was a change in government in Ecuador. So it's been a long fight, and it's not over. It will take, could even take years to fight for his freedom if we have to go through appeal court and the Supreme Court here. But let's hope it doesn't come to that with public support, because it does matter both in this country and internationally in Germany, all over the world, that pressure can be applied to actually end this very tragic situation that we have to fight for an innocent man, a publisher, for the simple crime of publishing the truth.
Very few journalists employed as investigative journalists. Their numbers really cut down. So what would they have done? Where did their biggest scoops come from? From Wikileaks and from Snowden. And why did these people feel obliged to publish them? Because they knew they were true. They knew that they were the only papers who could do it, that it would increase circulation, it would get them more credibility. And I really say to you today that our campaign would be more successful if the editor of The Guardian and the editor of the New York Times were with Julian in prison. I'm not saying should be in prison, but Julian and Wikileaks made the information available. The fact that it went global and was published in all the principal liberal newspapers globally is fantastic. But why is only WikiLeaks and its founder being prosecuted? Disregard of any international norms. It's one rule for your enemy and another rule for yourself. After all, we know what has been happening in Iraq. We know what's going on in Afghanistan. Not a single prosecution by the international courts set up by the West. Why? Why? We know the scale of the massacres that took place. We know what happened in Fallujah in Iraq, where they were shooting wounded Iraqi prisoners in the head, saying that's what you do to dying animals, according to a report in the New York Times. No prosecutions at all by any international body. Why? Because they are supposedly our wars, and our wars are good wars, and the killing the enemy is part of our patriotic duty. That's why. In any system which was genuinely impartial, a legal system globally, I mean, why wouldn't Bush, Cheney, and Tony Blair be facing an international court? Why wouldn't they?
I was satisfied with the event. If something could be added, I'd probably add a Q&A session at the end. But yeah, I was happy with it. There were some good speeches. I'm happy to see that there were more people here in support of Julian Assange, because when we're out campaigning in the streets, we don't see many people really giving us much attention, probably because of the lack of mainstream media coverage of Julian Assange, because it's controlled by governments which don't like Julian Assange. But yeah, I'm quite positive. I think we'll get there. And hopefully people will realize that Julian Assange represents their freedom, their right to a free press, and if he goes down, they go down, and their right to a free press goes down. His freedom is our freedom.
Yeah, I'm John Rees. I'm one of the co-founders of the Stop the War Coalition in this country, which was the organisation that pulled all the big demonstrations against the Iraq War and has campaigned against war since. And at the moment, I'm working with the backing of Stop the War on the Don't Extradite Assange campaign. It's not a surprise to me in this country, especially coming from the anti-war movement, that the public is way ahead of the media, the mainstream media in this country. The turnout tonight was very, very strong, very, very enthusiastic. It's one of the biggest public meetings that there's been on this issue so far in this country. I'm not surprised that the mainstream media is lagging behind. I think the mainstream media had, what should we say, a quarterized sense of what is just and unjust. They tend automatically to see things through the eyes of the political establishment, and it quite often takes a shock of ordinary people telling them that this isn't the view, this isn't an acceptable view, this isn't the right view, this isn't a just view, before they begin to get the message. And I think we began that process tonight, but it's got a long way to go. There's always something you can do, and it doesn't matter how little that something is. Of course, anybody who's organising a campaign wants the most from people, but it's also important that we have a mosaic of tiny acts. So if you can put a sticker on the tube as you go by, do that. If you want to wear a badge, do that. If you want to post on social media, do that. If you can attend a demonstration or give us money or set up your own support group or hold a public meeting, do that. If you can contact your MP, do that. There's no lack of things to do. It's just the will and the determination to do them. But it's on that kind of will and on that kind of determination that any progressive change happens. We would still have apartheid in South Africa if it wasn't for that kind of action. We would still have a situation where women didn't have to vote if it wasn't for that. Trade unions would still be illegal if it wasn't for that. So never believe that you can't make a difference, and never think that how little you do, it won't matter. Every little act helps change.